You took away an aunt, a mom, a cousin, a sister, a niece. Like, you took away someone's family member for your selfishness. It's just unforgettable.
She was a phenomenal mom, and just for him to do that, it's unforgivable. I got a message to him.
Yeah.
I just want to say you're a weak, pathetic coward.
You took away our rock. You took away a gym.
This is the second person killed at this specific MARTA station since late April.
More worried about the World Cup. Well, what happens before the World Cup? What happens after the World Cup? Like, what if the World Cup wasn't coming here? Like, there's no protection for these women at all. Like, and it's sad.
30 seconds. That is all the time that passed between John Elijah Matthews walking up to where Margaret Swan was sitting on a MARTA train in Atlanta and Margaret Swan being dead. 30 seconds. The surveillance cameras inside train car 134 captured all of it. At 11:21 in the morning on Saturday, May 30th, 2026, Margaret Swan was sitting alone, looking at her phone. At 11:24, Matthews walked onto the train car and moved to stand near her. 19 seconds later, according to the arrest warrant, he reached into his front pants pocket, pulled out a folding knife, grabbed her by the head, and cut her throat. She screamed. She tried to get up. He held her down and stabbed her 18 to 20 times. When he was done, he threw her to the floor. He stood next to her body, and when the train pulled into the Oakland City station at 11:27, he walked off, knife still in his hand, and sat down on the platform. He did not run. He did not hide. He sat there. Officers arrived and arrested him at 11:28. 1 minute after the train stopped, a patrolling officer rushed to the train car at 11:30 and found Margaret Swan lying motionless in a large pool of blood. She was 66 years old. She was on her way to keep one of her grandchildren. She was a mother of 3. A grandmother of 5, and a great-grandmother of 4. She did not know John Elijah Matthews. She had never spoken to him. She had done nothing to him, and she was dead in 30 seconds. This is the full story, who Margaret was, what the evidence shows about how she was killed, what her family has said in the days since, what the questions around MARTA's security reveal, and what it means that this happened 6 weeks before the FIFA World Cup brings hundreds of thousands of visitors to Atlanta and onto the same transit system that failed to protect a 66-year-old grandmother on a Saturday morning in broad daylight. Stay with this all the way through. Because this case is about more than one act of violence. It is about what a city owes the people who move through it every day. Margaret Swan was the rock of her family. That is the word her daughter Shania Sams used, the rock. She was a woman who had spent her life showing up. Her ex-husband, Jerry Swan, described her as a devoted grandmother who loved spending time with her family. He said she was on her way to keep one of her grandbabies when it happened. She took the MARTA train regularly, without fear, without incident, the way millions of people take public transit every day, because it is how they get where they need to go. She had 5 grandchildren. She had 4 great-grandchildren. She was someone around whom a family organized itself. The kind of person whose absence does not just leave a gap. It leaves a collapse. Her daughter Tiara Sam said she was a phenomenal mom. Just for him to do that, she said, "It is unforgivable. I don't forgive him. I will never forgive him ever." Her daughter Shania put it the way that has stayed with everyone who heard it. You took an aunt, a mom, a cousin, a sister, a niece. You took away someone's family member for your selfishness. It is just unforgettable. And Margaret's granddaughter, Lakita Wooten, delivered a message directly to the man charged with killing her grandmother. She said,
I got a message to him.
Yeah.
I just want to say you're a weak,
"Those
pathetic
words are not
coward."
just grief. They are a statement about the nature of what happened. A 66-year-old woman sitting alone on a train, looking at her phone, minding her own business, and a 25-year-old man who looked at her, decided something, and acted on it in 30 seconds. Weak, pathetic, coward. Those words fit what the evidence shows. John Elijah Matthews is 25 years old. He is from Decatur, Georgia. At the time of his arrest, he did not have a listed address or phone number. He was reportedly homeless. He had a folding knife in his pocket. He had blood on his clothes. He offered no explanation to investigators. and told detectives he did not want to continue speaking with them. The arrest warrant obtained by local media is precise and devastating in its detail. It describes the surveillance footage frame by frame. It describes Matthews standing next to Margaret for 19 seconds before the attack began. It describes her screaming and trying to rise from her seat. It describes him holding her down. It describes him throwing her to the floor and standing over her until the train stopped. It describes, in the language of an official legal document, 30 seconds that ended a life. Other passengers were on that train. When Matthews began the attack, they fled for safety. At least one passenger confirmed to investigators that Margaret Swan had no interaction with Matthews before he attacked her. None. Not a word, not a look, nothing. The passengers called for help, they ran. And Margaret, who her daughter said was carrying a knife of her own for protection, never had the chance to use it. Her daughter Shanae said the attack was an act out of nowhere. She did not have time to even try to protect herself. Everybody watched it, Shanae said, and nobody helped her. That sentence lands differently depending on how you hear it, because nobody helping is not the same as nobody caring. People in danger, watching someone else attacked with a knife, running for their own safety, is a survival response. It is not cowardice, and blaming the other passengers for not intervening is the wrong question. The right question is why there was no officer on that train car to begin with. The security question. MARTA, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, has 280 sworn police officers. It has 12,000 security cameras across its rail stations, buses, and train cars. It operates a real-time crime enforcement center during operating hours. It uses undercover patrols. It has, by its own account, one of the largest transit police forces in the country relative to the size of the system it covers. And Margaret Swan was stabbed 18 to 20 times on a Saturday morning in broad daylight in under 2 minutes. And not one officer was present in that train car. Her daughter Shanae asked the question plainly. Where were the security? It is a fair question, and it does not have a clean answer. Because the mathematics of transit safety are genuinely difficult. 280 officers covering a system that moves hundreds of thousands of passengers across dozens of stations and hundreds of train cars every single day cannot produce a guarantee of an officer in every car at every moment. That is the reality of public transit security. The coverage is necessarily incomplete, but incomplete coverage is not the same as adequate coverage. And the families demand that officers physically ride the trains rather than simply patrol stations is not an unreasonable one. It is the difference between a visible deterrent and a response capability. One prevents, the other arrives after. Shanae Sams asked the question that cuts through the MARTA press releases and the security statistics. She said, "What if the World Cup wasn't coming here? There is no protection for these women at all, and it is sad. That question matters, because the World Cup is coming to Atlanta, and in the weeks leading up to the tournament, MARTA was already planning to extend officer work weeks to 6 days to handle the influx. When Margaret was killed on May 30th, MARTA accelerated that timeline immediately. They did not wait for the World Cup. The death of a 66-year-old grandmother on a Saturday morning made them move faster, which means they could have moved faster before, which means the urgency was always available. It just required a body on the floor of a train car to activate it. That is the uncomfortable truth that Margaret Swan's family is pointing at. Not that MARTA is uniquely corrupt or uniquely negligent, but that the level of protection being offered to riders in the weeks before the World Cup, the level that was deemed necessary and appropriate by an upcoming event, was not the level being offered to the people who ride MARTA every day just to get to their lives. What makes a World Cup more important than a grandmother on her way to keep her grandbaby? Shanae Sams is asking, her family is asking, and Atlanta should be listening. What we know about Matthews. John Elijah Matthews is 25 years old. Beyond his age, his city of residence, and the fact that he was reportedly homeless at the time of the attack, the public record on who he is and why he did what he did is thin. He had no listed address. He had no phone number. He refused to continue speaking with investigators. He has not entered a plea. His defense attorney, named in court documents, did not respond to media requests for comment. What the surveillance footage shows and what the MARTA police chief Scott Creher described publicly is a man who acted with chilling deliberateness. He walked to where Margaret was sitting. He stood next to her for 19 seconds. He looked at her. He did not speak to her. He pulled out a knife and killed her in under 2 minutes. And then he walked off the train and sat down. He did not try to run. He did not try to hide. Chief Creher described it simply. He finished attacking her, and he just stood there and waited for the train to stop. He got off the train car, went over to the platform, and just sat down. He did not even try to run or hide. That detail, the sitting down, is the one that changes the texture of this case. Because running is fear, hiding is calculation, sitting down is something else. It is either the behavior of someone who did not believe they had done something wrong, or someone who did not care what came next, or someone whose grip on the ordinary logic of consequences had broken in a way that the evidence alone cannot explain. What drove Matthews to stand next to a stranger on a train and decide to kill her in 30 seconds is a question that the legal process will eventually have to address. The motive, if there is one that makes sense, has not been made public. What has been made public is that he was homeless, that he was alone, and that he walked onto a train car on a Saturday morning with a folding knife and used it on a 66-year-old woman who was looking at her phone. There is no version of that which makes sense. But there may be a version that explains it, and understanding what produces that kind of rupture in a person, in a community, in a city matters. Not to excuse what he did, but to understand where the next one might be prevented. Because Margaret Swan was not the only person hurt on MARTA in recent weeks. Just last month, a man was stabbed multiple times at the Georgia State MARTA station. In April, a 16-year-old boy was shot and killed at the Oakland City station, the same station where Margaret died. The same station. 2 deaths in weeks apart at the same location. These are not isolated incidents. They are a pattern. And a pattern demands a systemic response, not a press release, the federal charge. On June 2, 2026, the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia announced a federal charge against Matthews. He is charged with committing an act of violence using a dangerous weapon with the intent to cause death on a mass transportation system. If convicted, he faces the possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty. The Attorney General of the United States will determine whether the government will seek the death penalty. United States Attorney Theodore Hertzberg said Margaret Swan was a beloved great-grandmother who was brutally killed in an unprovoked act of senseless violence. He said Atlantans, and the many people who will soon visit for the FIFA World Cup, deserve to travel free from fear of a violent attack. He said the government will not tolerate murder and mayhem on MARTA. Those words are the right words, but they arrive after a 66-year-old woman is dead. They arrive after a family has already been told that the person who was the rock of their lives is gone. They arrive after a daughter has already said on camera that there was no protection for these women, and it is sad. The federal charge is a significant escalation. It signals that this case will be prosecuted at the highest available level. It signals that the government takes transit safety seriously enough to invoke federal jurisdiction. And it signals, whether intentionally or not, that the stakes of what happened on that train car on May 30th were understood from the moment the footage was reviewed. The question the family is sitting with is whether those stakes were understood before May 30th, and whether the answer to that question will change anything for the women who ride MARTA next week, and the week after, and every ordinary Saturday when no World Cup is coming, and the cameras are watching, and the 280 officers are spread across a system that moves more people than any single security force can protect one car at a time. Margaret Swan was 66 years old. She was on her way to keep one of her grandchildren. She was looking at her phone. She had her whole Saturday ahead of her. She was dead in 30 seconds. Her daughter Shania said there are no words that can explain how we feel right now. We are all lost, confused, angry, and scared. It is just too much. Why was there no security? Why is nobody trying to prevent this from happening? Those questions do not have satisfying answers yet, but they are the right questions, and they deserve more than a press release and a longer work week for officers in the weeks before a football tournament. Margaret Swan deserved to get to her grandchild's house. She deserved to ride a train in peace. She deserved to exist in a city that took her safety as seriously before her death as it did after it. Remember her name. Say it out loud if you can, Margaret Swan. Not because of how she died, because of who she was. The rock, the gem, the grandmother on her way to keep one of her grandbabies on a Saturday morning in Atlanta. I am John. This is the Crime Lab. Share this if it moved you. Subscribe so you never miss a case. And leave a comment with the question this case left you sitting with. Because the best thing this channel can do is not just tell you what happened. It is make sure the people it happened to are not forgotten. I will see you in the next one.